Hi, thank you all for coming today. As Sally mentioned, Dean and I both work for the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality. I'm actually centered in the Division of Waste Management. We have a lot of different divisions within the department, but as GIS analysts and professionals, we collaborate a lot amongst the department. And so today I'm going to talk about the incident management tracking system that we built in preparation for Florence. During major storm events like Hurricane Florence, our department is responsible for managing a large variety of environmental incidents with staff scattered all over the state. Sharing information about the incidents can be complicated with power outages, timing, and distance. So a centralized tracking system that is capable of storing, sharing, and summarizing information about these incidents is critical. And about 36 hours before the storm, a team of us decided we could build a system. And we did, actually. We were pleased. I think the fact that we had Esri online tools made that all possible. I've worked for this department for over 20 years, and I've seen it respond to many hurricanes and storm events, and we've never had an integrated tracking system like this one before, and it went pretty well. We have, first time we implemented it, we have some lessons learned. But so our team got together and recognized that the system needed to be accessible and easy to use by all staff within the department. We didn't know who all was going to need to enter incident information, so we had to make it open for everyone. They needed to be able to enter data and also edit it. Also, the system, we needed information and tools to be stored in the cloud to protect it from being affected by power outages. And we wanted our incidents geo-referenced to be displayed in a map format. And finally, we needed some sort of reporting and summarizing capability so we could push live incident data up to our upper management that were answering questions to, the media, to government and governor and at the EOC. So we set about building this system. We call it a system because it's actually made up of several different components. The first thing we have, I'm going to kind of summarize these real quick, but I'm going to try to give a demo of each one if everything works out. We utilize Survey 123 to develop a data entry form. The data that came into that Survey 123, through the Survey 123 form, went into a feature service that was pulled into our incident editing mapping application so that you could go back later and see what you did and move the point or update the data or the incident information if you wanted. We also use that same incident data feature service and pulled it into a dashboard for upper management to be able to view. And then we had the DEQ storm tracker, which kind of had a lot of different data and information in there as a mapping application to be used by anybody that needed it for planning. All right, so I'm going to attempt to, I'm pretty sure this one's not going to work, so I'm just going to go ahead and do Alt-Tab. There it is. So this is the data entry form. We've seen a lot of this today. Survey 123 seems to be a great tool that a lot of people are utilizing. As I mentioned, our division is very diverse. We also deal with a lot of diverse types of environmental issues. So we had to make a form that was pretty simple, straightforward, but captured the information that we knew different programs and people were going to need. So we just kind of wanted it, we didn't want it to be overly burdensome though. So the key things was, collecting information about this incident, the name, a description. If it was a permitted facility and you knew the ID number, that would be key so that you could tie it back into other databases later on. Current status of the incident was very important because that's how we symbolized a lot of our data in the dashboard and other places. So current status of the incident, anything from urgent action needed all the way down to no action needed. A brief description of the action, some notes. The one thing we wanted to do, as I mentioned, we kind of wanted to streamline it. So we had a short form, but when you came in and if you were entering, once you entered what division this incident may be related to, additional questions would pop up depending on what you actually selected. So you could go in and say, well, if I'm water resources, which it would ask you to select a program within water resources, and if you said animal operations, then a whole nother list of questions would pop at the bottom of the screen, or at the bottom of the form. One of the things that was really important for us, I'm not going to hit every single field, but one thing that was very important for us, that you properly locate the incident so that we could geographically reference it and display it in the map. We did find that a couple people stepped over that, and I want to figure out how to make that mandatory next time, because we had a lot of dots at 00, because folks failed to actually locate the map, but it's or incident. But it's quite easy. I mean, you set the location, you can either zoom in, you could type in an address, or you can hit the locate me button, and it looks like it's pretty accurate. Wherever this blue cursor fell is where your incident would be located. And so that was pretty easy to do for people that are non-GIS folks to be able to locate their map. We had a pretty good success. We have a little training to do. The other thing we liked about this is that you could upload photos and attachments. So there were a good number of photographs and documents that were filled out by field staff witnessing or kind of giving details about that particular incident. And then the additional information down here is all about, I said, the special questions about animal operations. And then you would just hit submit. I'm not going to, but that data would then go into this feature service that we pulled into quite a few different types of tools. This first one is pretty simple. We wanted staff, once they entered the incident, we wanted them to be able to go in, view it, move it if they had it in the wrong place, update it as the incident changed. We also had this open to edit by anyone in our department, so other people could go in and update it too, because the person that initially took the call may not be the person managing that particular incident. So it's all color-coded based on the current status of the incident itself, and you could click on it and see information about it. And then if you wanted to edit it, you would click the edit button. You could move it then and go down through all these different fields and change or update the information or add to as you were managing the incident. So I'm not going to go in a lot of detail with that. That's just a pretty basic data editing application that was very helpful for us. And that was more for internal use. The next tool, which was very critical, was our dashboard that we developed for our upper management to be able to utilize. And so they could this is basically real-time data. As you updated your incident information, it flowed into the same feature service and was reflected in this dashboard. It gave some just general information, like total number. It was kind of neat when it went from 0 and started information started populating in there. There's this bar map or bar scale that kind of showed you, sorted again on the status of the incident, where these were and how many there were. Of course, there were a lot more red back during the storm event, and things have died down. The other thing that we added, as management was starting to use it, they started needing to ask questions. And so Dean, in the middle of all this, was able to go in and add a filter that helped folks kind of clean this up a little bit and zoom into what they were more interested in. Let me turn that off real quick. So you could go in and you could ask, you could clear, is filter just on the status or a division or a county? I like to go to Duplin County. Well, excuse me. These are kind of hard to hit. And then Duplin County has a lot of animal operations, so I would assume, and that was Division Air Water Resources that managed those. So the majority of incidents in Duplin County really were related to more animal operations than anything else, but I'm sure there's some other things in here. And I apologize for the quality of the display. Things get cut off. The other interesting thing that happened was, we use this during Florence, but about a month later, or less than a month later, Michael hit. And we already had all the tools up and running. We had staff that knew how to use it. So we wanted to be able to differentiate between the incidents that occurred during Florence and then the incidents that occurred during Michael. And so I see Dean added this little date here, incidents occurring after, it was pre-populated. I don't know. It was populated with October 4th. I think that was the date that, that was kind of the cutoff between Florence and Michael. And for some reason that's not coming back, but you were able to quickly kind of filter that out. So that's, and then the last tool that I was going to demonstrate was the DEQ Storm Tracker tool. This is a publicly available web application. It's the kitchen sink of web maps. It's got, it looks pretty simple now, but before the storm, we tried to populate this web app with as many data sets as we thought people within our department might need to use to help plan. Again, we weren't sure who all was going to be doing what planning and what their needs were, so we tried to be as comprehensive as possible. So as you scroll in, it looks pretty simple, but then you get to a certain point and the whole thing lights up. There were 30 or so data sets. We tried to pull in data sets from all over our department, from permitted facilities to Superfund sites to underground storage tank facilities, dams, public water supply sources. We just wanted to have as much information as possible. Another thing that's very, very important and changes constantly during a storm event is these active disaster debris sites. Our Division of Waste Management permits those and approves the location of those, but they change constantly throughout the day during the worst parts of the storm. And so you can turn all this off and you can turn on things that are important. And so the active disaster debris sites was very important. The other thing that we really appreciated was the fact that during the event, NOAA and other agencies started providing information to help us assess what impacts had happened to maybe our sites or the state, the state resources. For example, the NOAA was flying certain swaths of the state to get imagery of the areas that they felt were going to be most impacted by the floodwaters. The thing that was helpful for us is that we had sites we knew were vulnerable to flooding. And we wanted to be able to determine whether or not they had been inundated with floodwaters. We didn't want to send an inspector out there during the time. But this NOAA information has been really helpful for us. I can just show you one example, if I can zoom to it quickly, where we have one of the many programs in my division is the pre-regulatory landfills. And so these were landfills that were put in a really long time ago. They're not lined. They were before the solid waste rules even existed. These guys can have all sorts of types of contaminants coming out, metals, pesticides, chemicals. We wanted to be able to see if these sites were being impacted by the storm or being impacted by the floodwaters. And sure enough, here's one of our sites that if you zoom in far enough, you can see the inundation. This whole parcel is part of that old landfill. And you can see the inundation of water right there. And so we actually came back later, post-storm, and created incidents to highlight sites that our staff are going to need to go out and visit and work on. I think a lot of the programs were doing that same kind of prioritization. With something, can we visualize that this was probably impacted? We need to go out there and check it out later after the worst effects were over with. Okay, so that kind of summarizes this toolbox that we built. And one thing that was really interesting to us is that something we didn't envision when we first were building this is that we were also going to have outside collaborators, people outside of our department that needed access to our data. US EPA and Division of Waste Management worked very well together. They came in, Region 4 EPA came up to North Carolina, and they had certain types of incidents that they were responsible for evaluating and responding to. And there particularly were tanks, barrels, and vessels containing petroleum and hazardous materials. And they had to go out and evaluate whether or not there was, are there some in the waterways? Do they need to be removed? Is it just an empty tank, or is there something in there that needs to be abated? They also partnered with U.S. Coast Guard and Wildlife Resources to help, because they had boats and things that could go into these inland waterways and also coastal waterways to help pull those tanks and things out. So we learned kind of 12th hour, we needed to collaborate with them. Their EPA's GIS contractors had contacted us. They, fortunately, were already very up on using Survey 123 and Collector app and ArcGIS Online. We were able to give them access to our feature service, our incident feature service, and they were able to consume it, use it, edit it. So they were also editors of our data and added incidents, it worked really, really well. We were kind of impressed that it was as seamless as it was. Jeremy Poplowski, one of our staff, helped build this collector map that pulled I don't know if you can see these dots in here, these were our incidents. Pulled it into their collector app where they had this quarter quad grid that was overlaid over the federal disaster declaration list. And they would go through each quad and kind of clear it for incidents. And this, I don't know how well you can see it, but they could not only edit the incidents, but they could edit the quads to show this one it's not been assigned yet if it's purple, or I think if it's gray it was closed out, green it's in progress, and then pink or red it needs action. So they could note here to send more people out to these quads to help with. They were able to, and I don't know what time frame they worked, but it was fairly quickly. They were able to clear over 1,000 grids. They removed 99 containers, over 4,000 gallons of liquid waste, and over 6,000 pounds of solid waste within a fairly short period of time. And we were really, really proud of that collaboration. So just kind of to start summarizing a little bit, one thing that I think is kind of interesting, I like about ArcGIS Online, is you can go in and see the usage numbers, how often your data is being viewed and pulled into maps. And this was over a 45 period of time, starting September 14th, but I don't know why that says 15th. But you can see at the peak, they were getting over 400,000 hits a day. Over this whole 45-day period, we averaged over 120,000 usage hits. And the whole period, we had over 5 million hits for this incident data. Now, that doesn't mean that there were 5 million people that looked at it. I mean, there's different, the way they track it is a little bit different. But I mean, that's an indicator that this was heavily used data. Pros and cons, lesson learned. I have definitely a lot more gray hairs than I did before this started. But the pros were easy to use, and upper management had access to real-time information, and they were very, very grateful for that. It was easy for us to share data and data entry editing with other outside agencies, as I mentioned. The cons were that not every division in our department was able to utilize it, mostly due to lack of preparation time. They just couldn't change their business practices to start utilizing this tool. But our plan is to start now. We want to, excuse me, I skipped ahead. Let me do a couple lessons learned. Some of the things we learned during the middle of it was we needed to predefine some of these terms, like what is an incident? Everybody has a different opinion of that. What do we want to call this and how are we going to manage that? Also current status. If it's urgent action, does that mean an hour, 24 hours? Kind of predefining some of these things would have been very helpful. We also need some, more stakeholders to help us in the future develop a more robust system. So we need input from other divisions and program, and have training conducted before a storm event, and also require login to enter and edit data for safeguarding it. We had made a decision, and we knew it was risky, to make this publicly open. Because we had so many people in our department that had not had ArcGIS Online logins, we didn't want to slow down the process of requiring a login. We didn't, and we also didn't know exactly who would be entering the incident information. So we made it public, knowing that, at some point it could be questioned. And sure enough, some organization with web crawlers or whatever went out and found it and publicized our incident data. And so we did have to pull it back and put it behind sign-in, but at that point, we already knew who was doing the data management, and we also could easily give them access. So that was something we want to improve upon next time. So what's next? Our department fully supports that we continue to use and increase the use of such a system. So we've got a team of people together that are prepared to start working on this. It's going to be a diverse team of stakeholders and get input, not just GIS people, but input from all sorts of different levels of people in our department. We want to make sure it meets the needs of more programs and divisions. And we've got to figure out, we've got some legacy databases within our department that aren't real agile. And we want to figure out how to be compatible with them to avoid having, some of these people had to go back and do double data entry because their system couldn't consume our data once we created the incident data. So we want to work on that. We are planning on doing some staff training way in advance and also purchasing some more equipment for our field staff, like tablets, so that they could go out and use the collector app and gather information relatively quickly. EPA brought a lot of that equipment with them, and we shared it, which really helped us. So these are our team members. Jeremy's here. Dean's here. I'm here. Cam, unfortunately, is not, but feel free to ask questions now or catch any of us up later on. And I don't know how much time.
10 minutes or so.
Oh, good. I sped through that. Okay. Does anybody have a question that we can answer? Yes. So the question was, what was the learning curve for upper management? Were they didn't do any sort of editing or any of that. They were just viewing it. And we did have some feedback during the event when incidents just got they just started piling in. They wanted us to configure it so that maybe it could flash red if it was reported in the last 24 hours. They were having some problems sorting it out. But at that point, we didn't really have the filter on either, did we? No. And so we kind of made improvements to help them because we didn't expect them to know anything about this. We knew that it was going to be kind of thrust in their arms. We did demo it for them before, but do you have any?
Well, yes, I can stand up. The real beauty of that is that it didn't require any real formal training because at worst case scenario, you just close the browser and open it back up again. So, and that little blinking red dot thing, I always laugh when I hear that because the person that made the request was laughing when they said it to me. They were like, okay, I'm going to try to stump you as the person that developed this. It's red now and it's bigger than the rest, but could you make it flash so that it doesn't get mixed in with the other ones? And I was like, wait, I think I can do that. And sure enough, we were able to pull that off. So, but it was our top status. So the things that we were looking at with the most scrutiny, within 24 hours, it would blink. And then after 24 hours, it would just go back to the big red dot if it hadn't been adjusted otherwise. So, but that was one thing that I think kind of gets lost in the conversation here is that, and it was something that Amy mentioned early on, we're an ESRI shop. And before the storm hit, we're, as I said, an AGOL organization, and they actually put more resources in our organization. So we had more server clusters. We had, more connectivity. And we never saw a hiccup with any of these applications that I'm aware of. We never saw one go down. We never saw one even get sluggish. So I think they need a big pat on the back there too. So, more questions?
Well, thank you all so much for hanging in there. See you later.